Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to Mondays Down South. We're back for another action-packed episode because we just finished the first NFL Wildcard matchups, and we also have a special guest, a first-time guest. His name is spelled Khoa, but it is pronounced Khoa. And Khoa and I have worked together at Peraton for a little over a year now, and we have hilarious, not only just sports takes on the phone, obviously after hours, right? When we're just talking about football, but Khoa and I have actually had the luxury of meeting up on a work trip where he threw me an alley-oop dunk at like 1 a.m. in the morning at some office with one of those like Fisher Price, like hoops, like on the back of a door. And he threw an alley-oop to me. I slammed it home, LeBron James style, from the rafters, one-handed jam. And we chest bumped, and we knew we were good friends right after that moment. So, and I actually believe, Khoa, your quote was, even though you're in your 40s and I'm in my 30s, we will forever be young. We will forever be kids, wild at heart, young at heart.
Absolutely, man.
Yes.
I still play Call of Duty at 46, so it's I'm always going to be a kid.
I love it.
But yes, yeah. Khoa, so long story short, Khoa, he supports the Coast Guard account, and it makes a lot of sense with him wearing the Commanders jersey right now. So Khoa, if you don't mind, walk us through your journey as a Washington fan. I know you've had some hardships over the years, but you guys are doing great. You guys advance in the wild card. We'll talk about that playoff matchup shortly, but just go ahead and walk us through your journey as a fan and how you became a Commanders fan.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys, for having me on. I'm excited about talking to you guys about sports, especially my Commanders. So my journey as a Redskins / Commanders fan started in '82. My family immigrated here together in '82, and my dad was working at a restaurant out in Georgetown, and it was the night that they won their first Super Bowl in 1982. I was 4 years old, and my uncle and my mom were driving us out to pick up my dad. And we were on M Street in Georgetown. If you guys are familiar with M Street out there, it was packed to the gills with people. I was 4, but I didn't know what was going on. But it was just a bunch of Redskins fans just packed, celebrating the first Super Bowl win. John Riggins running that, 44-yard touchdown. 60. What was it? It's called 60 counter. And my uncle, we were just stuck there, put me out the sunroof, and everyone was just high-fiving me. I didn't know what was going on, but from there on out, I was just like Redskins, burgundy and gold, and I've been a fan ever since. Obviously, I grew up in the Joe Gibbs, dynasty area of Redskins success. Unfortunately, that ended when Daniel Snyder took over, and it's been trying times, I guess is the best way of putting it, for the last 20, 25 years. But obviously with Josh Harris, Magic Johnson, Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, and of course Jaden Daniels coming in, it's been a breath of fresh air, new life into the fan base, and I'm all about it, man.
I love it. I feel like it ended when I was born. I'm just cursed here because this is what my third playoff win I've ever seen, and the first one I think I was probably like a couple years old, so it barely even counts. And the other one was 15 years ago. But I'd love to have a true fan here on the pod.
Awesome, man.
Has it really been 15 years since RG3?
I think more. Well, he never won one.
They didn't win one in 2012. Yeah.
Mark Brunell was the quarterback. Sean Taylor scored a touchdown in the game. I think it was 19 years ago, something like that.
It was 19, yeah.
Was
2006
game against the Seahawks, if I remember correctly?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But the Marshawn Lynch era, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Crazy one. Yeah.
Yep.
Welcome.
Oh no, that was the Matt Hasselbeck era. That was Sean Alexander.
Sean Alexander, you're right.
Yeah, predating Marshawn Lynch.
Really? When RG3 was playing?
Oh no.
That was
so the
yeah.
last.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
I was talking about the RG3, but
yeah. That was the Marshawn Lynch and
something special, man.
Yep.
Yeah. That's
so
who,
the last Redskins playoff win was that year, Tampa, and then they went on to play the Seahawks and Matt Hasselbeck, and they lost that one.
And then they went to the Super Bowl and lost to the Steelers, right?
Yep. That was the same one.
That
Yep.
was an epic era. What a
Yep.
throwback. I love that.
good times.
Well, welcome aboard. I'm gonna let Evan speak because you guys got some celebrating to do this weekend, unlike me and Zach. So we can start with your game since we already gave the full breakdown of the Commanders. I think it's apropos that we start with that. Obviously, an impressive win, a doinker. I like to think that was like the perfect it was so symbolic for your franchise after years and years and years of just coming up short to have it go the other way. Maybe that's the Jaden Daniels of it all, like adding that aura, whatever it is. So I'm just going to tee that up and just let you guys talk about it. Great game, fun to watch.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I was texting you guys, but it felt like if Dan Snyder was still the owner, that doink would have gone the other way and straight out of the end zone. And Khoa, you'll appreciate this. Guess who I ran into here on the streets of New York about literally an hour ago? Josh Harris.
Dude. No way.
Yeah, he was
there for the 76ers game?
I think he was catching a helicopter to Philly to go to the Sixers game would be my guess. But yeah, I walked right by him. I didn't have time to say anything, unfortunately. But
he also owns the Devils too. So he might have been going to Jersey.
Yeah, obviously pumped with the win. I thought the team played really well. The Bucks were the ones that ended up making the mistakes. The big turnover there by Baker towards the end of the game was probably the difference. But I thought it was just a really good football game. I mean, a lot of the football this weekend was pretty lopsided. I thought the Eagles game was terrible. We'll talk about that later. But I just thought it was really good football all around. The Bucks made some penalties here that were huge, and obviously the turnover, like I mentioned. But just super, super glad they could pull it out. I mean, this team, just has so much fight. And, when you got the best player on the field, which is usually number 5, with the exception of a handful of people in the league, then you're in pretty good shape. So I'll pass it to our guest, though, for some more.
No, thanks, Evan. You're absolutely right. Definitely the most entertaining game of the weekend. All the other wildcard games were blowouts, and it really was fitting the way the game ended and how the game flowed was really what the Commanders were all about. Especially the last 5-6 games of the season. They were cardiac kids. Last drive, last play. It's one of those things where, like you said, Evan, if this was the Daniel Snyder era, I don't think a lot of those games would have bounced our way or plays would have been made. But there is something special about Jaden. I think the stat is he's the first quarterback to throw throw touchdown passes in the last 30 seconds. I think 4 or 5 touchdown passes in the last 30 seconds of a game this season. And I think that's an NFL record. And just to have a rookie quarterback or a quarterback in general for the Commanders, obviously the last competent quarterback, in my opinion, they had was Kirk Cousins. They probably never should have let him go. Some people hate Kirk Cousins for whatever reason, but he was the last competent quarterback that the Redskins / Commanders Washington football team had. But the poise, the decision-making, just the playmaking ability of Jaden Daniels, he obviously has lifted this franchise and the fan base to a place where it hasn't been for obviously almost 20 years. Winning a playoff game. Also, with the fan base and the players themselves, coaches, all that, they believe. It's that mentality of why not us? That's the kind of their motto now in the playoffs is why not the Commanders? They really can beat anyone. The team is flawed. The roster's probably, I would say, average at best, besides Daniels and McLaurin and some other players, but you look at their roster, they're not one of the best rosters still remaining in the playoffs. They're flawed, but because of what Daniels is able to do, because of his maturity and his playmaking ability, there is a belief that they can beat anyone. And, everyone wants to say, Detroit is going to win in a blowout. Well, I'm pretty sure Washington was the underdog in most of their games this season, and they ended up 13-5 so far. So I do believe.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, Khoa, and expanding on your point in regards to the game here, regardless of the outcome. Although it's going to be a tough one going into the Detroit hostile environment, playing against the best play action offense in football right now. Despite that, I think the best news is, right, you're playing with nothing to lose, like you had mentioned, like why not us, right? Because you guys are going to go out there, play your best football because it's pressureless. It's a pressureless environment. Jaden's got ice in his veins. He's proved it all season. But I think even with a loss, right, you guys go into the offseason, it's a win-win because I heard a recent interview from Cliff Kingsbury, and he said in no way, shape, or form is he ready for a head coaching job. He said, and to my surprise, he would entertain it in the future, even though he aged like 30 years and 3 years as a head coach for the Arizona Cardinals. I thought what was important was that he said that he's very happy where he's at, and he's learned a lot from DQ. Like Dan Quinn came in from the moment he got there. He said, "Hey, are you going to buy into my standards? If not, you're walking." Like, just give me a heads up so I can cut you so you can go do well on another team. Because if you don't buy into my standards and this organization with new leadership and ownership, then you're not going to cut it here. And everyone bought in. And so as a result, they've seen a lot of team success and team camaraderie. So it's actually really cool, the win-win situation being Cliff Kingsbury is going to stick around as an OC for years and years to come before, 5 years down the road, he takes that next head coaching job. So you guys are in arguably one of the best positions in football, but I'll kick it over Sizeway, get his thoughts.
I mean, first and foremost, I want to start with the good vibes. Like, great win, going on the road, beating the Buccaneers in their house. Like, I don't even want to talk about the next game yet. I know that's going to come up in a little while, but I just want to acknowledge how great of a game that was. I also want to tip the cap to Baker and the Buccaneers for an amazing season. I mean, Zach and I definitely didn't give him the credit that he deserved. Evan was kind of on it. They've obviously had a lot of big injuries. Chris Godwin was a massive piece for them this year, arguably just as good, if not better, than Mike Evans this year, and losing him was big for them, and they managed to make it this far, still make the playoffs and host a home game. That's really impressive. I think it's clearly not a team to sleep on, and I think Baker deserves a ton of credit. He may have made a mistake, but he's shown he has the dog in him in a way that I didn't believe in him earlier in his career. So I just want to give them props. Obviously, amazing win for the Commanders. I'm just so blown away by Daniels. I think everyone's going to say that, but he looks like a veteran out there. I mean, that's really and that's part of him being a 24-year-old, savvy quarterback who's been in multiple programs prior to getting drafted. Clearly he's been through the ringer and has had the experience of what it's like to have these difficult situations and overcome them. And that's why he's shown that he doesn't look like a rookie at all. I can definitively say now that he's had a better rookie year than CJ Stroud, which is a crazy statement in context because a year ago we were talking about CJ Stroud arguably having the best rookie year ever. And now if you ask me who I'd rather have, I mean this with no offense to Stroud, I'd take Jaden Daniels, which is crazy because if in the draft I said he was going to be better than Stroud, people would have beat me with a stick, I think, because they would have been like, that's a crazy take. Moving on from that, I was laughing when Zach was like, oh yeah, Cliff Kingsbury is like, oh yeah, I'm not ready for a head coach job. Yeah, damn right you're not ready for a head coach job. If someone's crazy enough to hire you after 1 year as an OC, after what you did with the Cardinals, that would be ridiculous. I think the best thing for him is to be working with someone like Dan Quinn, who's obviously an amazing players coach and has the ability to lead a team when he has the right coordinator. We saw that with the Falcons. When he had Kyle Shanahan, a great offensive mind, they were able to make it to a Super Bowl. Not the greatest result, admittedly, but at the same time, he's shown success with that. So I think they're a great pairing, and I don't think Cliff should ever leave because I think his odds of having a team like with Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin is very unlikely, and he's proving his worth. So I'll give him credit where credit is due, but I'm not about to talk about a guy being a head coach after 1 year of being an OC after he just proved that he wasn't a great head coach. I'm not trying to be a hater, but that's my opinion. Respect to him for what he's done. He's proven me wrong about being an OC.
Yeah, I agree. You should need to put at least a couple of good OC years on film. Like Liam Cohen looks like he might get the Jaguars job. That's another one. I think he's brilliant as an OC. But again, that's a guy that's really only done it for 1 year, and you're taking a big risk by hiring. But sorry, Zach, go ahead.
And not the transition games, but to absolutely transition to the Philadelphia Eagles game. Do we think that Terry McLaurin is better than A.J. Brown at this point? We have A.J. Brown sitting on the bench, hitting his unders week over week. He was 82.5 yards. He was he had 10 yards or 20 yards in the entire game. He's reading a book on the sidelines. I mean, goodness, there's no bookmark, there's no anything. I mean, it's clearly a prop for attention. Devontae Smith is outplaying him. Saquon and Jalen are taking this offense over. Defense is playing great. A.J. Brown is no way, shape, or form, contributing in the playoffs. to this team. So do we think that Terry finally has the nod over AJ?
I wouldn't say that. No. I would say they're different receivers. So they're very different type of receivers. And, you have to, it's hard to say, I love Terry, but he's not a Jamar Chase. He's not a JJ, Justin Jefferson. He's different than AJ Brown, I would put Terry definitely top 5. He's, to me, I would rather have a Terry McLaurin than an AJ Brown because of Terry's personality. He's not a diva. He's team first. He's shown that over his career. He's played with, it's 8 or 9 different quarterbacks throughout his career, and he finally has a legit quarterback thrown to him. And what happens? He breaks the franchise record for receiving touchdowns the first year he's with Jaden Daniels. So, I hate it. I wouldn't say I hate. I don't like it when people try to say, okay, who is top 5? It's, every receiver, when you talk about Jamar, you talk about JJ, you talk about, Amon-Ra St. Brown, even from Detroit. He's a different type of receiver than JJ or Jamar or AJ Brown. He doesn't have the size, but he's a great route runner. He catches everything that's thrown to him. He very much like Terry McLaurin is a team first guy. So for me, I would rather take an Amon-Ra St. Brown or a Terry McLaurin over like a AJ Brown, or you look at what's happening with Deontay Johnson. He was with Carolina. He got traded to Carolina at the beginning of the season. Wore out his welcome there. Got traded to Baltimore. Wore out his welcome in 2 games, and then got traded to or released, picked up by the Texans, and wore out his welcome in 2 weeks. So to me, is you have a lot of these diva receivers that are really, really talented, but at the end of the day, you don't have receivers that are talented and team first, leader type players like a Terry McLaurin or Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off that. I think that's a very well put. Like, if you ask me who I'd rather have, I can definitely see the argument for why some people might pick Terry, because he's more of a team guy and like has for years dealt with adversity at the quarterback position and has managed to hold true to the team, and is now it's paying off and he's showing how good he is. But am I going to pick him over AJ Brown? No. Also, AJ Brown's kind of banged up, which is part of why I don't think he's been as good as he usually is. My tiers are pretty simple. At the top, it's Jetta on his own. Then you got the Jamar Chases of the world, and you got CeeDee Lamb, and you got Amon-Ra St. Brown, and and then guys like AJ Brown and them. I think I would probably group Terry McLaurin and like Nico Collins and guys like that into that group of people that can like really elevate. Terry probably a little bit higher because he's been doing it for longer, but that's kind of how I look at it. If you're asking me for rankings, but no, I don't think he's better than AJ Brown. But I do agree they're different skill sets. I think he's clearly proven he's an elite receiver. That I'm not like. It doesn't really matter if he's better than him or not. Is he a great number 1 for a team? Yes. Do you need a better number 1? No. And that's all I really need to say about Terry. He's a dog.
His career for me actually might, when it's all said and done, be similar to Mike Evans, who was on the other side of this game, where like the record he broke, Jerry Rice's 1,000-yard, season consecutive record that he broke. It's like just that consistency year over year. And, he maybe is never going to be like considered, top number 1 receiver in the league or top 5. I mean, I know Mike Evans was kind of in that argument at times, but it's more just the longevity, the consistency, and everything that Khoa just mentioned as well. So, that's kind of what I see with him. And I think there's some similarities there because Terry's got 5-6 years of 1,000 yards. I don't know what it is, but he's racking up.
This is his fifth. Yeah.
Fifth. Yeah. He's
great. Yep.
And with all the quarterbacks you mentioned, he's played with way worse quarterbacks. So he's building a similar kind of streak. So, and he's got a few more years left of it. So,
I like to bring a coach streak. It's that better.
Yeah, I know we're kind of running, and I wanted to talk about the Commanders because obviously it was an amazing performance, and Khoa and Evan are big fans. But we might want to get to some of the other games. But maybe what we can do instead of just doing the recap is there's a consistent prompt I've seen with 3 teams that lost, and it's these quarterbacks that are kind of right there in the fringe top 10, or they already are in the top 10, but like they're trying to break it close to that top 5 ranking. And Jordan Love and in Justin Herbert. And they just caused too many turnovers. I mean, you can even argue with the Sam Darnold in the year he's had today, the year he's had with Minnesota, leading them to 14-3 in the regular season. Just these 3 quarterbacks just kind of melts under the limelight, under the pressure, and obviously cost their team when they were very much in it at a certain point, and then the train kind of fell off the tracks in the third and fourth quarter due to interceptions. So, do you think that these quarterbacks are hindering their teams and like they need to be traded, or they need to be, there needs to be another look elsewhere? Or do you think, I don't know, I'm trying to find like a spicy, transitional point, but essentially they did cost their teams the season again. And that is problematic. So I don't know, maybe Ev, I'll kick it your way and get your thoughts.
So quickly on the clickbait question that you're looking for. I mean, ultimately, if you can't block and you can't protect the quarterback, like you have no chance. So like Herbert he was getting destroyed all game. He usually does not turn the ball over like that, but Houston has an amazing defense. And once you fall behind, they lose the run game. It got really ugly. Also, 2 of the picks were just awful drops by his receiver. The pick 6, Will Dissly just tipped it right to the defender, and then the McConkey one was high, and obviously Ladd's a stud, so I don't but it still got tipped right to the defender. So
it was catchable. It was catchable.
And if not catchable, at least not tipped. Just kind of a bad luck where it got tipped, and then I can give some content here and just bury the Packers for a minute though.
There we go.
Jordan Love is utterly so overrated. He played one great playoff game, and everyone wanted him to be a top 5 receiver, and the Packers paid him like one, and he was not good at all this year. And the Packers as well are the second most overrated team in the NFL. Khoa, for you don't have the background on this, but I despise the Bengals. Everyone's obsessed with the Bengals.
Oh, interesting.
But it's just all sexy and absolutely nothing in the trenches. So they're the most overrated team in the NFL, but the Packers are number 2. They honestly embarrassed themselves for me in that Philly game because the physicality, and they just acted like they did not want to be there, because I thought Philly played terrible themselves, but Green Bay just had absolutely nothing. And just from the first kickoff of the game, the guy gets drilled and fumbles. Obviously, there's a little question mark on who actually recovered that football, but I think the Packers kind of embarrassed themselves, and have been utterly so overrated all year. Everyone wanted them to be a Super Bowl sleeper, and they are nowhere near that. They're not as good as the Rams. They're not as good as the Commanders. They're not as good as a lot of these teams. And yeah, that's my take on the Packers. I just think that they've just, kind of embarrass themselves and show their true colors as to what they actually were this year, and that they can't beat a good team.
I completely disagree about them being specifically the Jordan Love take. I think that's ridiculous. The man went in, he was clearly hurt. That it was so obvious if you watch him play, he was clearly hurt. And then he comes in missing one of his top receivers. And then throughout the course of the game, he loses all his receivers along the way. Romeo Dubes gets hurt in the end zone, and they're playing in Philadelphia against a better Eagles team. I'm not saying he played well. I certainly think they didn't. It's not like they look great. They didn't look good. They had a bad game. I don't disagree with that. I think the notion that the Packers are some super overrated team that has no future is crazy to me, because the reality.
I never said future.
Oh, okay. Whether you say future or not, you buried them saying that all these teams are better than them. It wouldn't surprise me if they come out weak next year and be better than those teams. I think an issue has been consistency, but they've also had a lot of injuries. A lot of teams have injuries. I don't dispute that, but I think it's totally unfair to Jordan Love to say he's had one good game ever, and for that reason he gets all this hype. Jordan Love is very good, and he has a immense ceiling that we've seen, and I don't think he has been that bad. I mean, sure, he lost to the Eagles, but the Eagles are the second best team, third best team in the NFL right now. I think that's it's not some crazy statement that they went into Philadelphia and got beat against a team that was arguably healthier than them. One thing I will say really quickly, though, is we're focusing on the quarterbacks. I want to bring it back really quickly to Saquon again, because I want to give him some love in the playoffs. Talked about it early in the year. Me and Zach were kind of going back and forth early in the year, because Zach said Saquon would be an overrated signing, and when
did this become a Saquon topic?
I just want to speaking of quarterbacks being overrated, I just got to bring up Saquon. I want to talk about my boy. Early in the year, Zach mentioned that Saquon was going to be one of the most overrated signings. I can find the clip and send it to you, Khoa, so you can rate them for me. But Saquon Barkley just continues to prove, when you put a great running back on a good team, how much they can elevate them. So this isn't even to roast Zach. I just want to give him a little bit of crap since you're on air, Khoa. But the reality is, I just want to take a minute, and we're talking about quarterbacks, but let's give credit where credit's due. The reason Philly wins these games nowadays has less to do with Jalen Hurts and their passing offense and more to do with Saquon and their running offense. He's the one who set the tone, and he just continues to put them in great positions to succeed, even when they don't play well, as Evan alluded to. So I just want to give him props because we're talking about quarterbacks, but the reality is he was the one that took that game over.
Yeah, no, I actually want to make a point about running backs after I talk about the other three games and the quarterback performances from those games. My most disappointing team from this weekend, it has to be the Minnesota Vikings. Yep. Even though Sam Darnold, came in as kind of, the backup quarterback, and then when J.J. McCarthy got hurt, obviously he got elevated to the starter and shined, outperformed a lot of people's expectations for him this year. But at the end of the day, they won 14 games, and they were one game away from being the number one overall seed in the NFC. And they completely, I don't know what, I'm going to say it shit the bed. I mean, they completely shit the bed the last 2 weeks against Detroit and against the Chargers. I think I saw a stat where Sam Darnold this year was 14-0 against the rest of the NFL, 0-4 against Detroit and LA. And what do those two teams have? They have great pass rushers. We saw that in the Monday night game. LA was stressing and pressuring Darnold all game, and New York had that formula. How do you get to good quarterbacks? You pressure them, and so I think with the performances, I think Minnesota definitely has to be the most underwhelming performance of the weekend. Second, in my opinion, has to be the Chargers. Justin Herbert with the running game, with that defense. I think the Chargers defense was either second or third overall this season. They had a legitimate, championship defense this year. And Herbert, for whatever reason, he's gotten paid. Regular season, he's fantastic. Playoffs, other than that one game against Jacksonville a couple years ago where he led them, on that tremendous comeback, has been pretty abysmal in the playoffs. He threw, I think, was 3 interceptions the entire regular season and 4 in that game. Obviously, to you guys' point, a couple of them were tipped by the receivers. Disley's, drop was terrible. McConkey, you can argue, that could have been a catch, but it went right through his hands. But still, you expect someone that's been paid, what is it? I think $50 million a year. He has a $250 million contract to lead his team to playoff wins. As far as the comment about the Packers being overrated, I'm going to have to go against that argument, Evan. I think the Packers, they played beyond expectations, honestly. When you have a team like that, yes, they have Jordan Love played fantastic last year. He got paid this year. He's overcome a lot of injuries this year. To Sai's point, he came in without Christian Watson, tore his ACL the last game of the regular season. Romeo Doubs in the first quarter of that game against the Eagles had a concussion. And then I think he lost one of his other receivers too, his third receiver. I don't know if it was Melton or
Reed went out too.
Jaden Reed went out. So top 3 receivers against the number 1 pass defense in the league with those 4 rushers. That's tough to overcome. But with that, I do want to go to Sai's point about running backs. You look at Saquon Barkley, you look at what Josh Jacobs did with the Packers as well this season, and you look at Derrick Henry. I think the days where people don't appreciate running backs anymore, I think that needs to be revisited now, as those guys went to new teams. All 3 of those teams went to the playoffs, and all their previous teams were, I think, 3 or 4 win teams this year. You look at the Titans, you look at the Raiders, you look at the Giants, they were all 3 or 4 win teams this season. So you can't say running backs don't matter anymore. And lastly, the point I want to make about quarterbacks is I think there needs to be some sort of cap on quarterback salaries. When you have a roster of 53 players and you're paying one of those players 20 to 25% of your salary cap, that just doesn't make sense, and that's where a lot of these teams get into trouble, That's why the rookie success of quarterbacks is so important now, and people are trying to look for that next Jaden Daniels to have that 4 to 5 year window where they're not paying their quarterback $50 to $60 million. You look at Dallas, You look at New York Giants paying, Daniel Jones and Dak Prescott $40 to $6 million a year. What are they going to do? They haven't had success, and they're stuck with these absurd salaries for quarterbacks. And obviously it's the most important position on the field, but at the same time, does it really warrant 20 to 25% of the entire team's salary cap?
Yeah, Zach, I think you should go because you haven't spoken, but I just want to say something really quickly. I want to defend Justin Herbert for 5 seconds. That, in my opinion, that was not on him at all. I watched that whole game. It was a situation where he went into Houston, and admittedly, I didn't give Houston's defense enough credit, but obviously I've known that they're very good. They played elite, and the issue is Ladd was the only one getting open. I mean, it was he couldn't do anything. I mean, his offensive line was getting destroyed by the defensive line. J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards were good early, but they kind of abandoned that, as Evan alluded to. And then he was making throws and putting the ball in receivers' hands, and they were either dropping them or it was going through their hands for interceptions. He maybe had 1 or 2 bad turnovers, but it's not like C.J. Stroud had some amazing game until at the end of the second quarter. He played as well as he could given the circumstance that he's in. He needs more weapons if he's going to go beat a team on the road. And the other thing, it's not like Houston offense played well. They did not. They were the reason they won that game is their defense was elite and they won at home, and that's really how I look at it. I would pay Justin Herbert over $200 million to be my quarterback. I'd 100% would. I love that man. I think you can build around him. I mean, they made the playoffs their first year with John Harbaugh, which goes to show that they have some potential building blocks there. But Zach, go ahead.
It's an interesting thing that Khoa says because I never really thought about it because I've kept my heart close to it since Ezekiel Elliott got his big deal and then just decided to gain 30 pounds and not work out in the offseason in Dallas. And so I've always been against, paying running backs a substantial margin to nobody's, surprise. Their value is depreciated on the football field, not to take away from them, but monetarily it certainly has. But then I look at Christian McCaffrey going to 49ers. Then I look at Derrick Henry. People thought that Derrick Henry was going to take away from Lamar Jackson's stats, and they only enhanced them because here he is as an MVP candidate, and he has surpassed all of his stats and more from the year prior where he won it unequivocally. And then you also look at the Saquon, which I couldn't agree more with. It's not really the Jalen Hurts passing that's scaring players; it's the running attack. So I agree with that. I think that's a great point. There's two players I want to mention really quick because I cannot wait for this prompt to occur later, Evan. The one where it's the top 5 players teams can't wait to release, because I'm going to give you a sneak peek of what that episode looks like. One is Deshaun Watson, who the Cleveland Browns are actively trying to void his contract, his guaranteed money, because he was out walking around in a walking boot when he shouldn't have, and he ruptured his Achilles or he did something else to his leg. And then the second is Quentin Johnson. And yes, I'm putting Quentin Johnson in that same conversation because that dude cannot catch a ball to save his life. We're blaming McConkey for dropping the ball. We're blaming Will Disley. And then, Herbert, I was blaming a little bit earlier, but Quentin Johnson just does not have it together. So I don't even want to spend any more time on Quentin Johnson, but I felt like it was worth mentioning.
Yeah, he's awful. He's awful.
He's pretty bad.
He had this problem in college too. It's one of my frustrations with the league of it's like a relationship, right? You always think you can fix the person. And it's usually quarterbacks, but it's people they see the speed and they see the downfield threat he is, but he can't catch the ball. Too. He can't catch the size. He can't catch the ball. It's this is probably college.
Though, because he has a couple of really good games in the middle of the year, which is why I think they keep trying to roll with it.
You fell under the trap, Cy. You fell under the trap.
I'm
not out here being I want Quentin Johnson. It's a tough situation because it's we drafted him first round. He gave us a couple of really good games. You don't want to end up in a situation where it's I'm not saying he's going to be Jerry Jeudy, but you don't want to end up in that situation where he ends up being good if you just let him go, right? So it's a tough one. But
don't draft wide receivers from TCU. Jalen Reagor, Quentin Johnson,
Jahan Dotson,
forget Josh Dotson too from the Redskins. I was so excited when they drafted him. I was oh, dude, he's going to be such a playmaker.
That was a wild one.
Yeah. What are we on next? Quickly, I guess on the Rams Vikings, Kevin O'Connell got utterly outcoached. So we're talking about Darnold having cost himself a lot of money, which he potentially did. I still think he's getting I think I predicted 4 for 150, like a Baker Mayfield kind of contract. He's a year younger, so I think he's going to do well. Maybe not as well as he would have before the last 2 games. But Kevin O'Connell's in the same boat because he's a free agent. I assumed it was slam dunk that he's going to get his money and they're not going to, let him move on or like do a whole trade situation. But he got utterly outcoached in the last 2 games by Aaron Glenn defensively, and then McVay in this game. So that's another thing I wanted to mention. And shout out to the Rams for their young defense that looks really, really good right now as well.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give Stafford props, though. We talked about this earlier. Brian Flores, when all these blitz packages and stuff are going to work against 99% of quarterbacks, but when you put a veteran out there who has won a Super Bowl and has been doing it for 15 years, it's not going to work against him. And that was a huge difference on the offense side. Kevin O'Connell's not going anywhere, though. The man has proven with multiple quarterbacks and multiple team layouts that he can win games and make the playoffs and compete in a ridiculously good division. He's not going.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't see Kevin. I mean, I think Minnesota would be really, really doing themselves a disservice if they let Kevin O'Connell hit the free market. I mean, because you let Kevin O'Connell go, who are you going to replace him with? Mike McCarthy?
Unless you get Ben Johnson.
Yeah, Ben Johnson maybe, but even then, like it's an unknown. Like what you have with Kevin O'Connell. He can develop quarterbacks. He can win. That he can lead a team. You really, everyone wants to think like Ben Johnson is the next great thing until he's not. I feel like that's everyone wants to like put these offensive gurus on a pedestal, but you have to remember, not all OCs can be head coaches. I mean, Cliff Kingsbury is a prime example of that. Some people are just better at being coordinators. They can't handle the all the duties of being a head coach. Norv Turner is another prime example. I mean, he got a job at Washington and a couple other stops, but he was never as successful as a head coach as he was as an offensive coordinator. So, a lot of these people want to prep these, offensive gurus up to be like these head coaches. Some of them work out, obviously, like, Matt LaFleur, Kevin O'Connell, and Sean McVay, who all happened to be on the Washington staff at one point. And we all let them, we let them walk. So, but I just think that, there are known candidates out there too. You saw what happened with Washington, obviously with Dan Quinn and how much success they've had because he's learned from his previous experience. But I think teams have to be very careful when they're making these coaching decisions.
I agree with you, and I think you can never predict for sure if someone's going to be good or not. But I do feel a little bit of Commanders bias in that take.
I'm just saying.
How have we not talked about the Bills yet? I mean, shout out Bills. Also, Evan, shout out to you with holding the fort down with the Rams pick. Sai and I were very, very heavily focused on Minnesota. I had a pretty defiant take last week, Khoa, about Minnesota covering that -1. It was that attractive carrot right in front of you. It was like -1, you got to take Minnesota. They're 14-3. Right. But Evan held true to his colors, so wanted to just tip the cap to Mr. E on the.
I almost faded. I wanted. I'm a big Sam Darnold guy, so I wanted them to win. But yeah, I almost caved. I was back and forth the day of, but. The Bills looked amazing. I think maybe we start pivoting into next week's games because the Bills just curb stomp Bo Nix and the Broncos. But
with the Ravens and the Steelers, there's not really much to talk about. So I think we jump into predictions for next week.
Yeah, and we can kind of tail it in. To should we start? I mean, we can kind of go in order. Texans Chiefs. Chiefs are 8.5-point favorites. I'll just quickly. I think the Chiefs are going to dominate that Houston offense. Like I think Sai mentioned, Houston offense did not look good against the Chargers, and the Chiefs are a way better defense. I think, I don't think the Chiefs are going to score a ton of points, maybe a little bit of rust because their starters haven't played in like a month, but I think the Chiefs will handle them pretty easily to open the divisional round on Saturday.
I would agree. I think they cover. I think the Chiefs cover -8.5 in a cold environment in Arrowhead. Give me Kansas City. Sai?
I'm a Super Bowl champion, so that's all you need to know.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the kind of devil's advocate here. When they played in the regular season, Texans played them super close. Chiefs almost lost that game. I'm actually going to take the Texans on the upset.
Wow.
That is a statement.
That is huge.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yep.
I could see it like being. I think it'll be like close-ish, but I'm never gonna feel. I think it's gonna be a game where I never feel like Houston's gonna win. Like I think the score might be close just because it's gonna be a defensive, more oriented game. But I don't think there's ever gonna be a point in the game where I think the Texans are gonna win. But I love it. I love it.
Them going into Kansas City too. I mean, I think the score on that game looked closer than the actual game was in the regular season. Because I watched that Chiefs-Texans game, and the Texans look outclassed the entire time, even with the Chiefs not scoring a lot of points. So I think in Arrowhead, like in the cold, we'll see how they do.
Yeah, I don't have much else on that game. We can maybe go into more detail on the others, but Saturday Night Football, Khoa, can the Commanders upset the Lions? Let's go to you first.
I mean, I can't go against our team, man. I mean, I'm going to pick Commanders all the way.
I love it.
Two upsets
what
on
is
a
it?
Saturday.
Minus what's it?
9.5. It opened at
9.5 for Detroit.
It opened 7.5, which I was
Dude,
shocked by. I thought it'd be 9 or 10.5, and it's gotten pushed up to 9.5. But
I just don't see this team getting blown out. It's going to be a close game. I'm not going to sit here and say Washington's going to win it running away. It's going to be a close game. It's going to come down in the fourth quarter. I think it's going to be a shootout. Washington's defense is suspect, especially in the secondary and against the running game, which are two things obviously that Detroit is obviously good at. But I think Commanders pull off the upset.
love it. What do you guys got?
God, Zach.
That's hilarious.
Love it.
Khoa. That is and then Khoa awakened from his dream because
Hey, man.
Detroit is the scariest team to play in the NFL right now. It's going to be a scary environment indoors, Ford Field. You've got so many weapons offensively that the Lions have, and their secondary is scary. Their rookie corners playing great. They brought those DBs in. They were playing fantastic branches, especially. Give me the Lions in an absolute blowout. I'm talking 41-14.
Oh, man,
this
we're going to have to
game
make
is
a
not
bet
gonna
on
be
this,
close
Zach.
off of the jump. We will separately. I'll kick it over to Cy for this one.
Offline, we'll have to make a separate bet.
I'm going to – here's the thing. The Lions' defense is so banged up, and yet somehow they still continue to shock me with how well they're playing and still manage to beat teams decisively, at least, teams that have flaws like the Commanders do. I don't trust your defense even a little bit. I don't trust your defense at all, honestly. And I think the Lions offense at home is going to go absurd. The only way I see this game not working out is if Jared Goff chokes. That's the only way I see this game not working out. And he hasn't shown me this year that he's going to do that. And so for that reason, I'm on Zach's train. I think they win by a lot.
He did have a 5-interception game against the Texans at home earlier this season.
Yeah, they won.
Who won that game? The Detroit Lions.
That was in Houston.
Yeah.
Was that in Houston?
It was in Houston, and Detroit is undefeated on the road this year. They're 8-0.
And that was his biggest qualm, dude. Goff struggles more on. It used to always be that Goff struggled more on the road. He threw 5 picks. They still won that game. That just speaks to how good Detroit is as a team, and not all the way from coaching, all the way to personnel and players. I just think that going into their house and beating them with the issues that you guys have on defense is the concern that I am. I'm not saying your offense.
I wouldn't disagree.
Disrespect the Commanders. They've clearly proven their worth and why they deserve to be where they are. My thing is offensively, I think you guys can put up points. Defensively, it's just going to be ridiculous. And I think they get David Montgomery back this week, so they get their 200 monster back. So I got to go Detroit to cover.
So the challenges I'll make is that the Commanders actually had a top 12 defense this year. Specifically, the pass defense was. These are just facts,
right.
the stats, numbers, and stats.
I didn't believe it, but those are facts.
I care about what you see.
How is that possible?
That's just
you don't care about the amount of points that they allowed over the course of the season,
things like that are determine the course of that.
Also, he's on a 72-play, 90-yard drive.
Well,
you don't have as much time for the other team to score.
So this is my exact point, Zach. First, a couple trap game elements I do want to point out to this game. Obviously, Lions coming off a bye, not just a bye, but both of their coordinators were interviewing for jobs and not thinking about this game whatsoever. Minor trap game. I also want to point out Lions fans and their level of cockiness about this game, thinking it's going to be a wash and talking about how we have a rookie quarterback. We do not have a rookie quarterback. He's played 17 games in the NFL. He's, as Cy mentioned, 24 years old with tons of college experience. I am 0% concerned about this team folding in the atmosphere that's going to be insane. So I have absolutely no concerns about that. And obviously the big matchup issue, like you guys point out, is the run defense, and just like, how is this run defense going to stop Detroit, which is an absolute juggernaut, best offensive line of the year. Both running backs are going to be healthy. The works. The way they're going to stop that is what Zach just mentioned. They're going to play defense with their offense. Mm-hmm. They're going to go on 15-play drives. There's been 4 games this year the Commanders have not punted, which is exactly how they beat Tampa Bay. They're going to control the ball. They're going to try and keep time of possession. They're going to try not to turn the ball over, which they usually don't. And they're going to keep Detroit's offense on the field. And they're going to try and keep the game close. And they have arguably the most clutch quarterback in the league with all the game-winning drives we talked about earlier. And they're going to try and steal it late. And that is a recipe that could work. I think the key is going to be red zone. They need touchdowns, not field goals in the red zone. The red zone offense did not look great in that Tampa game, was one of the weak points, but that's the formula. You can play defense with your offense, like Zach mentioned, and just keep them off the field, as they've been able to do all year against a really banged up defense that's probably worse than the one they faced last week. So I think that's a possible recipe for success. I think it's probably too much to ask because the talent disparity of these rosters is so significant, but like there's a formula there, and this is not a team I am interested in betting against based on what they've done this year. So I'm not going to say I'm going to bet on them to win, but I'm not going to bet against them to win is probably how I would go about it. So I think they'll cover either in a backdoor fashion or by what I mentioned. I think it's going to go under because there's just going to be so much ball control, similar to how we saw that Tampa Bay game though. Mm-hmm. So there's a formula here that could work.
I definitely think they'll cover. They'll cover the 9.5 points.
Yeah,
for sure.
You already commented on, right? I just want to point to something real quick, because there's the thing. That Buccaneers win was a first. I've had this is just my opinion as an unbiased fan. I've always believed in Jaden. My concern has been with the and of course Terry McLaurin I believe in, but my concern has been with the team as a whole compared to great rosters. The issue was up until this Buccaneers game, and you beat the Buccaneers on the road in a playoff atmosphere. So I will never take that away from them, because they obviously played an amazing game to win that game. But prior to that, we're looking at 23-19 against the Cowboys, 30-24 against the Falcons that needed an overtime game against Michael Penix in his second start ever, 36-33 against Kenny Pickett and the Eagles, and you're looking at 20-19 against the Saints, which I don't even know how you won that game. You beat the Titans by a lot. And right before that, you lost to the Cowboys with their backup quarterback. So that has nothing to do with Jaden Daniels. He had good games in most, if not all, of those games. The concern that I have is teams that are objectively not good teams or objectively not playoff teams outside of the Buccaneers have given you guys a run for your money to the finish line week after week after week. So although I agree that you guys have managed to win those games, it shows your grit, because even in games where you probably should have won by more, you managed to keep it close, but you still won at the end because of how good Jaden is and because of how clutch you guys are. The Detroit Lions are not the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You're talking about long, sustained drives. They might have injuries, but it's not easy to go on the road against an elite team and have sustained drives. That's the issue with it, right? If the Detroit is, I don't think Detroit's going to let up the same kind of drives the Buccaneers are. The Buccaneers objectively have just not been a good defense for most of the year, and it came down to the wire in a great game. I just don't think it's the same apples to apples comparison with the teams you played in the second half of the year versus the team you're about to play. That's all I'm saying. And that has less to do with the Commanders and more to do with how good the Lions are, which we've been harping on all year.
They may not be the Lions, but they did beat the Lions. It was a long time ago, but I think there's something to be said about peaking at the right time. This is the healthiest the Commanders have been all year and the best they've been all year. So I think there's a recipe there for an upset. I'm not going to say it's going to happen, but I think that there's a formula that could be had. And I disagree about their ability to sustain drives on this Lions team. I wholeheartely disagree about that. I mean, they scored 35 against the best defense in the NFL, which is the Eagles. So,
here's one stat to add to that, Evan. So, apparently the Lions defense against running quarterbacks is 29th. And guess who is one of the top running quarterbacks and has been the rushing offense for the Commanders for the last 5 weeks? Jaden Daniels. So there's opportunity there. There's opportunity there. I'm confident in my team, but Detroit, I'm not taking anything from Detroit. They had a fantastic season. They're juggernauts, probably the best team, should win the Super Bowl based on talent alone, but
I think
can't take away from my Commanders this weekend.
My only 2 cents is when Evan said that Washington, the top 12 defense in the league, and that Jaden and company was not going to be rocked by that stadium and environment.
Oh, no
my
way.
Apple Watch told me that I had a stressful day. All right, so all I got to say is that there is a complete difference between a Tampa Bay playoff win on the road in Tampa when everyone's in their swimsuits, they've got a margarita, and all they care, they don't even know what quarter it is. All right, this is Detroit. This is a gridiron, blue-collar city that loves their team under Dan Campbell. They're going to be aggressive, and I just hope that Washington's going to be ready. Now, I will say that this is my most excited playoff matchup, despite the ones that we're going to cover in Sunday. So I'll kick it over Ev's way, and we can get on over to
No,
those
move on.
games.
They'll be ready. They'll be ready. The Commanders have a very similar coach, similar preparation to the Lions. They'll be ready, but the talent disparity is just massive between these two teams.
And real quick, before we move on from this one, I don't want to – my statement isn't quite as, as aggressive as Zach's, if you will. I'm not saying that you guys don't have a shot. That's a crazy statement, in my opinion, because you don't get to this round and win a road playoff game without showing up in a big moment. So that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you're talking about the Commanders peaking at the right time, which would be more scary if they're playing a team that's floundering. We're talking about the Detroit Lions team that's been peaking the entire season. Well,
they're banged up, though.
Maybe they've had 1 or 2 bad games in the entire year, and as of late, that has not been the case. So I'm not about to say, oh, you're playing someone that doesn't have momentum. That's the only issue they might have is rust off a bye, but they're going to be coming in feeling real good, though.
Yeah.
And when you got the best player on the field, you always got a chance. That's what I've been saying the last few weeks. And best player on the field is going to be number 5.
This is the easiest cover I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, wow.
Anyways, we got to move on. We don't want to take.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Rams Eagles. I don't know if someone want to go first. I went first on one of the other ones, but
yeah, I'll take a quick stab at it. This is going to be a really interesting game. You got to give it up to Matt Stafford and the entire Rams, McVay, and their offense, but even more importantly, their defense had stepped up big time. I mean, with the pass rush and everything against the Vikings. But all that said, and as impressive of a season that the Rams have had, I think that's going to be really hard to get a win in Philly. I think Philadelphia is going to tighten their screws a little bit. I think they're going to be a little bit more explosive offensively. I was harping on A.J. Brown. I actually do think that he will have a good response game amongst all their talented offensive players. And I think Jalen, now that he's got a game back, he's shaking off some of the rust. I think that's going to be beneficial for him too. So give me the Eagles -6.5 in Philly. It's going to be a cold one. And I just think the Rams' luck runs out here. So I'll kick it Size way.
Y'all know I've always been a big Rams and Stafford truther. I love their players. Super impressed with the Vikings with victory. So I don't want to just go into this game thinking that it won't, they're not going to hold their own. Anytime you have a veteran quarterback as good as Stafford, you will. I think they will. My issue is I just don't know how their defense is going to stop the Eagles offense between Saquon and between the weapons they have in the receiving game. It's a different kind of offense. And I recognize, the Vikings have a very good offense and they held them to a decent amount of points, but I just trust, you guys might disagree with me. I trust Jalen Hurts more than Sam Darnold personally. Even if he's not throwing in the air, I think he's going to be able to do it with his feet. So I just think there's more that they have to manage, and Saquon is just Saquon. So I just think the Eagles, their difference is going to be the Eagles' offense is going to be hard to stop for them, and I think the Eagles win this game.
You mean Hurts over Stafford?
What's up?
Did you say Darnold or Stafford?
He was comparing it to last week.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I'm saying compared to Darnold, not Stafford. No,
okay,
yeah, gotcha. No, I would not. No, I love Matt Stafford. That'd be by me. Yeah, I don't know what the spread is though. Do you have that?
6.5.
6.5.
I think the Eagles win by a touchdown or more. I think they cover that.
Yeah.
Khoa?
What do you got?
So my heart wants to say the Rams, but my brain says Eagles. I to both of your points, Zach and Sai. I think the Eagles are too much for the Rams. They're a different team than Minnesota. Minnesota had a great season, 14 wins, all that. But to Sai's point, Jalen Hurts is not Sam Darnold. He has more mobility. He makes better decisions overall than Sam Darnold does. And then, of course, you have Saquon, you have A.J. Brown, you have Dallas Goedert, you have Devontae Smith. And that defense from the Eagles, too, number 1 ranked pass defense. Stafford, you have Stafford, Nakua, and Cooper Kupp on the other side. But I think it's too much for the Rams to overcome in Philly. I don't know if the Philly will necessarily cover. I think it's going to be a closer game than people think, especially because you have a healthy Stafford and a healthy offense on the Rams side. But Eagles will win this.
Yeah, I was bringing up the upset take here. Jalen Hurts has been playing horrible, and he's rusty off that concussion. I would agree in the sense that maybe I trust him over Sam Darnold more because he doesn't make decisions. He does not put the ball in harm's way ever, and because of that, they cannot throw the ball down the field. Like that, again, I thought they played terrible against Green Bay. The pass offense was utterly anemic. The problem is the Rams stopping Saquon Barkley is going to be the biggest issue, and Jalen Hurts also is not a quarterback that plays well under pressure at all. If you can get in his face, and if the Rams defense played like it did against the Vikings, then that is going to be a huge problem. Now, granted, the Eagles have one of the best offensive lines in the league, so that's where the challenge is. So I was prepared to pick the Rams to upset, especially when the Rams have definitively the better quarterback and the better coach. And when you have the better quarterback and the better coach, you have a really darn good chance to win the game. The problem is I think it's going to be snowing. Actually, not just cold, but potential snow. And I don't know how the Rams are going to beat the Eagles on the road in the snow and how they're going to slow down Saquon Barkley. Because when you get that snowy weather, usually the running game and the running backs have a huge advantage. So if it was like reasonable weather conditions, I was going to pick the Rams to upset them behind Stafford and shutting down Jalen Hurts, who just does not look right. But it's just hard for me to pick the Rams in the snow. With Barkley on the other side. So it's kind of my take. I guess I'll take, say, like Eagles to win and not cover because of the weather. But if the weather is reasonable, I actually really think the Rams could win this game.
Yeah, that's fair. Very fair take.
Yeah, the Eagles look bad. Jalen is not – he's not right now after that concussion, whether it's rust or he's like actually not fully back. I don't know. But, I mean, that was an awful performance against a not very good defense last week.
I think Hurts might not look that great, but I do think that overall as a team, they're, for the most part, they've been very good. I think
their receivers looked awful too, though, because like you mentioned, Brown being injured, like Smith did okay, but
you're not the weak. I mean, if Hurts isn't throwing the ball well, but still, they have a good defense. Like their secondary is solid, their pass rush is good enough, and their linebackers are very good. So I'm not worried about their defense.
Stafford's going to score points though, so you're going to have to. I mean, if the weather is reasonable, which it doesn't look like it is, unfortunately, but.
I think the biggest thing about the Eagles defense that kind of differentiates them from other teams is they only need to rush 4. Their front 4 is probably the best in the league, I would say.
That's a very good one. That's a game-changing player.
Yeah. All those Georgia boys. But
yeah.
Anyway, anything else on that one before we go to the game of the weekend?
Eagles are going to win big. I'm just telling you right now. Stamp. Eagles are going to win big.
Well, if it's snowing, I'll maybe agree with you, but I got to see this weather, man. I'm telling you. But game of the weekend, Ravens Bills. I mean, you just cannot ask for anything better in a divisional round game. Baltimore is actually a 1-point favorite. I think it opened Buffalo -1 and it's maybe flipped to Baltimore -1. It is going to be freezing. Well, it's going to be below freezing. It's going to be like 15 degrees or something in this game. Over under is 51.5, so they still are expecting some points. I don't think there's going to be any snow. It'll just be really cold. So I don't know who wants to go first.
Khoa, you want to kick this one off?
Sure, I'll take this one. I'm going to have to make this pick on historical performances and matchups. I think Baltimore is 0-2 against Josh Allen and the Bills in the playoffs over the last few years. I think that streak is going to continue. I'm taking Buffalo. It's going to be a close game, obviously. It's going to come down to probably the last possession. But I think Buffalo, again, I think they're a team of destiny. They're kind of my AFC Super Bowl pick. So I'm going with Buffalo.
Yep.
You want me to go? All right. So I opened with Baltimore. Again, my Twitter, I'm a Orioles baseball fan, so my Twitter is always biased towards Baltimore sports. Right. So I always have to caveat that. But like, there's so much buzz on Baltimore right now, and I feel like there's nothing on Buffalo. But the entire year, Buffalo has been the better team. Baltimore was inconsistent. You would argue Baltimore is peaking at the right time right now, and they have Derrick Henry. So I opened thinking I would pick Baltimore, and I think last week in our full bracket, I picked Baltimore to win this game. I think I'm going to flip back, and here's why. And at the very least, I'd rather bet on Buffalo because First off, they're at home. They haven't lost at home this year. That one's pretty straightforward. Then you're looking at the weather. Sean McDermott is 14-2 in weather in sub-freezing temperatures. 14-2. Lamar Jackson, the coldest game he's played is like 25 degrees. Now I don't worry too much about Lamar's playing in the cold, but this will be the coldest game he's played in by like 20 degrees. He's from Florida, so I think it maybe isn't like a massive advantage, but it's definitely an advantage for Buffalo with the conditions. And then playoff Josh versus playoff Lamar. Now, this is the take that is going to upset a lot of people. But if I know both of these teams have not been able to get over the hump against the Chiefs. But if you look at all the games, it's never been Josh Allen that's been the reason that the Bills don't get over the hump. He's played exceptional football in all those pretty much all those playoff games. And it's just Mahomes does Mahomes things at the end, or his defense lets him down, or they make bad decisions. Whereas last year in the Chiefs game, Lamar was an utter disaster, I thought. And they played really terrible. So I trust the playoff version of Allen a little bit more than Lamar. I know that's going to upset a lot of people, not necessarily here, but my Orioles friends on Twitter and such. And I also think the Ravens maybe over-celebrated that Pittsburgh win. Like, Pittsburgh was a god-awful football team by the end of the year and an absolute joke in that game. That should not be something you're celebrating. And Ravens fans, and a lot of times their guys in the locker room are like, they're really over-celebrating that game, where the Bills are very much ho-hum right now. I think the Bills are being undervalued in the spot, so I'm going to take it. My worry is that the Ravens killed them in Baltimore last time, so maybe there's a matchup issue here. And obviously, Derrick Henry plays for the Ravens and not the Bills, so that's a big concern. But I think the Bills are being undervalued here, so I'm going to go their way.
Go ahead, Zach.
Wow, that's a very interesting take, and there's a lot of value and logic to what you're saying, Evan, with trusting playoff Josh over playoff Lamar, especially with colder weather. Who's got the stronger and more accurate arm? You would say that that's Josh Allen. Now, that said, give me the Ravens -1, because I think the rushing attack and the read option and their defense, which was playing a lot better under Harbaugh, is just going to win out here. They have the better skill position players. And Lamar, you could argue that this is a case for the MVP. I know the MVP is really only regular season, but I wonder if this will skew the decision one versus the other based on who plays better and wins this game. But I just think that it's Baltimore's year. They're playing much better, like Evan had mentioned, later in the season. The Bills, despite what they have done with their roster talent, it's nothing short of incredible. I just think that there are gaps and holes, even playing at home, and they are undefeated 8-0 at home. This is the matchup of the entire season, in my opinion. But give me the Ravens in a walk-off field goal. Justin Tucker does not choke. He hits the field goal. They advance to the AFC Conference Championship. So, I'll kick it over your way.
Yeah, I'm going to say this. The Ravens, the better running back. They have better quarterback statistically. So Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson. So they have that better backfield, technically with statistics. They have the better receiving group, assuming Zay Flowers is healthy. They have the better defense, definitively. That's not even a question. What they don't have is the MVP this year, which is Josh Allen. And I think in Buffalo with the weather, and this is no disrespect to Lamar, because I love Lamar, and if he won MVP, I totally would understand that. But the number one factor for me is going to Buffalo in the freezing cold, right? The only thing that gives me pause, though, is I've seen another team from their division. We're talking about them versus the Chiefs. I've seen another team from the Ravens division go into Buffalo in a really cold game just 2 years ago and go beat Buffalo in their house in a pretty convincingly in Joe Burrow. So we're talking about playoff Lamar versus playoff Josh, but Josh hasn't always been amazing in the playoffs either. I think that's important to note there. So this is going to be, I think, a lot closer marginally than in terms of playoff performances than I think we're speaking about. So I think both guys have proven their ceilings in the regular season, and I think haven't quite met them yet in the playoffs in terms of advancing to where they need to go. The difference for me is literally just going to be home versus away in this environment. The freezing cold. If it was more like a regular temperature, neutral site kind of game, I probably would have leaned Ravens because of the talent. But what Josh Allen is doing right now, I don't know if it's the Haley Steinfeld effect. I have no idea. But what Josh Allen is doing right now, even with all, with the turnover they've had, with all the guys they lost, with the new players he's had on his team, is nothing short of exceptional. And they've been the better team all year, as Evan alluded to, and at home. So it's just going to be really hard for me to pick against them in their own environment. But I will say this. I am going to absolutely flame Josh Allen if they don't win this game. Maybe that's unfair. It might not even be his fault, but I'm going to, because at a certain point, like, I watched my favorite quarterback growing up. I watched plenty of quarterbacks get roasted for not being able to win the big games in the playoffs. I recognize that a lot of those times it hasn't necessarily been his fault, but at a certain point, you gotta win the game when you're at home and you have, the home field environment and everything like that. You gotta win these games to prove that you are, right there with the other guy that's been winning every time. So I just want to throw that out there.
I think to your point, Si, it's the whole Brady versus Manning thing. If Manning never got past the Patriots and never won a Super Bowl, would he be in that conversation of greatest quarterbacks ever? And this is also the same. I think that's a fair point. For Josh Allen, he hasn't been able to get past Patrick Mahomes, and until he does, at some point you're going to have to say, hey, are you a Dan Marino or are you a Peyton Manning?
Or are you well, Mahomes is the Brady, right? So it's that.
Right.
Khoa, would you say that either one of these teams that advances, Buffalo or Baltimore, beats Kansas City this year?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm picking Texans to take out Kansas City. So, yeah, absolutely.
That's true.
I think Kansas City this year, despite them being 15-2, and that last loss to Denver was a joke. They played their second and third stringers, so I don't really count that as a loss for them. But despite them being, a one-loss team, they didn't blow out anyone. None of their wins were the typical Kansas City Patrick Mahomes type win. They relied on their defense this year. And to that point, I think you saw what Buffalo did to Kansas City at home. They were able to overcome that. Yes, it was a regular season game. It wasn't a playoff game, but I don't think Kansas City has that extra oomph that they usually do, even though they won the most regular season games they've won in team history.
Well, you could argue last year they didn't either. Coming into the playoffs, they were the underdog in every single game they played through the Super Bowl and won every single one, and on the road. Right. So I'm just saying, like, that's the one thing with them that always gives me pause against picking against them. They've proven in any environment, any situation, any outcome, they can come out on top, which nobody else has, and that's all I'll say there.
And I actually think it's the opposite this year. I think throughout the year, because they had a bunch of guys injured, Rashee Rice injury was big, I think they're peaking at the right time now, which they didn't last year. Like last year, it felt like Si said, how is this roster going to be able to pull off a Super Bowl? And they just did it by winning close games and like through the grit and the defense. This year, I actually think their roster is maybe the best in the NFC. When you look at offense, now that Hollywood Brown is healthy, you have him, DeAndre Hopkins, and Xavier Worthy's been really involved lately. I think the receiver core is in great shape. Obviously, you have Travis Kelce, Noah Gray. Both running backs are, Pacheco is coming back now. You have him and Kareem Hunt, who's been great. Offensive line's fantastic, and you have arguably the best defense in the league. I think this roster is way better than it was last year at this time. And obviously, if they are in a close game, they're going to pull it out. So
Evan inside, just admit it. Just admit it to me that you guys are scared of picking against the Chiefs because of the years beforehand. You're looking at previous years because you just threw in Noah Gray like that was a stat. Good
player.
When you said
Fair
Noah
point.
Gray.
Hey, I'm picking against the Chiefs, Zach. I'm picking the Texans to win this weekend.
We're on the same team. You and I are on the same team.
Yeah.
Come on, hear me out.
Fair point.
I cannot believe Zach had the audacity to speak those blasphemous words to me right now. I'm pulling out all the diction that I have from my vocabulary, given the ridiculous statements made. I have picked the Chiefs every damn week for 3 to 4 years in a row of us doing this podcast.
Exactly.
I have never been afraid to pick against the Chiefs. You want to know why? Because I've always believed the Chiefs would win. Meanwhile, Zach, every single year, has always found a way to try to pick against them. And last year, I kid you not, Khoa, every single game in the playoffs, Zach picked against the Chiefs. You want to know what saved him? He and Evan deciding to be the smart ones and winning a ton of money by deciding, hey, let's ride the Chiefs.
Yeah, we would be bankrupt. Our podcast would actually be bankrupt if.
That's what I'm saying.
But this is last year. This is last year.
Tell me I'm picking
I think they're better this year. I think they're way better there than last year.
They lost
because I'm afraid that they're not. Because I'm afraid that of prior years. No, I'm picking the Chiefs because I trust Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid more than I trust anyone in the world when it comes to sports. I think no matter what the circumstances, I've said it a million times, they have proven they can continuously win. And this year they proved it every single game except for one. I mean, it's how can I?
This is where I agree with you, Si. Everything you said, it's they've continued to somehow win games without the roster that people think they should have to be winning these games. With that said, though, a lot of the games they won have been, kind of lucky. You look at the one against the Raiders. Raiders were in field goal position. Aidan O'Donnell fumbles the ball and they recover the last second. They couldn't even kick a field goal to beat them. They blocked the Broncos field goal to win the game. There were a couple other games where there were just things that bounced their way and they were able to maintain that winning streak. At some point, that luck has to run out. I mean, it's just pure odds. It's like you can't continue winning on these lucky bounces. And to me, they won 2 Super Bowls in a row. They won 15 games this year, almost all of them by 7 points or less. 4 to 5 of them on lucky bounces, on blocked field goals, on fumbles at the last moment. So to me, it's like seeing all that, taking all that data in, is like at some point that luck has to run out. And I see it potentially happening this weekend. And I just don't think, it's so hard to do a three-peat in the NFL. It's hard to do a back-to-back championship, and at some point their luck just has to run out.
I think calling it luck would be a fair statement if this is the first time you've seen, or the first season you've seen, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Eric Spagnuolo, and that incredible defense find success. I think calling it luck after what we just talked about, when last year they had no right to win a single game in the playoffs outside of maybe that Miami game, and managed to win every single game in the playoffs and the crazy part of it was every single one of those games, for the most part, outside of the Miami one, was at the end of the game, them getting the ball and saying, we're going to ice this game because you can't stop me. And that's what they've done all year as well. Sure, they might get a lucky bounce here and there, but it's not luck when you put yourself in a position year over year for multiple years in a row to get the ball to bounce your way. You have to be in that situation, right? If anything, that just gives me more confidence in them because they've proven to me in tough environments that they can find a way to win in the weirdest ways possible, sure, but it still counts for something, right? And in playoffs, you're not playing in environments where it's going to just easily break your way. You're going to have to win the close game, and you're going to need a little bit of luck to go your way. And they put themselves in their position to do that more than anyone else. So
absolutely,
I go on my team about the Chiefs plenty of times, so I'm sure I'll yap about them hopefully next week, ideally if they beat the Texans. But hey, maybe Khoa, you never know. Khoa made a bold pick, so I can respect that. I respect that.
I do agree they had a really lucky year in terms of wins, but ultimately it doesn't matter. And like last year, it's how does your team look today? And I think their team looks better this year than it does at this time last year, and we saw it in the last year. So, but they're going
wins are wins, no matter how. I definitely won't take that away from them.
And the refs, they do get a really they get a really friendly whistle. They get a really friendly whistle. They get a really friendly whistle.
What great quarterback in history didn't get a friendly whistle? Let's just everyone acts like it's just the Chiefs. That's great.
And again, back to my Rams point, coach and quarterback. When you got the better coach and the better quarterback, you're a really hard team to beat. And that's the thing about the Bills. Like, I hate Sean McDermott. I think Sean McDermott's a terrible coach. So that's the main thing that holds them back. But
that doesn't make a difference. Yeah.
We good?
Yeah.
Is that it?
Who wants to fill? You guys, Si, maybe you want to walk through the New York plans for the Super Bowl right now with our guests.
Oh yeah, sure. So we're doing a Super Bowl party in New York City, and for a little bit of quick recap, Khoa, for the last couple of years, me, Zach, and Evan have gotten together in New York City because that's where Evan resides, and we've been going to visit him, and then doing like an epic Super Bowl weekend where we go out, get drinks, eat a bunch of good food, and then end up watching a Super Bowl together at a bar. This year, we're actually doing a party where we have a bunch of our buddies come out. We set up a Partiful, which is like an app to invite everyone, and we're working on finding the right bar for it based on the number of people we have. So we're going to have a big Super Bowl bash. We're going to do the squares and boxes and maybe bring a couple more games out for the Super Bowl. So I just want to throw it out there. I don't know what you're up to.
I'm always interested in something. Hey, Zach, I like to have a good time, man. So what weekend is the Super Bowl again? I forget.
It's February 9th.
9th? I think I might be able to, because I'm going to be in Lake Tahoe the weekend of the week of the 11th through 15th, so I should be able to pull that off.
If you can come up there,
open invite to all MDS supporters and listeners.
This is us trying to like force you to come right now.
Yeah.
It's an open invitation. We have probably about like 20 people that have confirmed, right? 25 people. So
we actually, I think we're closer to 30 now.
I will say this. So I will say this: if for some, lucky reason the Commanders make it to the Super Bowl, I am going to the Super Bowl this year.
That's fair.
I will say that. So
I respect that.
No, I already told my girlfriend. I was like, if the Commanders make it to the Super Bowl, I am going to splurge this year.
Khoa, you can't expense that to Peloton. You know that, right?
No, I can't. But
that would be awesome.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm just saying, if for some sheer stroke of luck, somehow the Commanders make it to New Orleans, put me in for New York for sure.
Wow,
for sure.
Wow, I love it. Yeah, I was thinking about too that boys, like the chances the Commanders make the Super Bowl are slim, but can you imagine if they did the 1 year we're trying to host like a big Super Bowl party and I'm like,
deuces, boys, deuces.
Yeah, I'm like, what am I? This is not.
Evan, you have all right.
Evan, you're telling me you would, man? If they made you wouldn't think about splurging going to the Super Bowl, man?
I don't know. I don't know if I can splurge to that level. I don't know if I can splurge to that level, but
Evan, I'm going to feed up with this. We can end on this. If the Commanders make the Super Bowl, your responsibility will be zero that night. We will handle everything. Yeah. You watch.
That's fair. That's fair.
Trust, man.
I can't even put myself in that situation. I mean, we've only won one playoff game basically in my adult life, so the level of stress would be something I don't know. The feeling. So, but luckily, I don't think we're gonna have that problem. But hey, you never know. You never know. So.
Hey, man. Hey, look.
Shout out to Khoa, though. I just want to say this: regardless of whether you win this playoffs or not, I have no doubt in my mind that this team will win at least one, if not multiple, Super Bowls in the next decade or so. They're very much on
knock on wood, yeah, absolutely.
And no, I'm not going to knock on wood for something when you feel good about a team, right? Like this isn't a superstition. This is just the truth. You're building something special. Jaden is special. All you got to do is keep the momentum. You'll get there. I'm not worried about it. It's his first year. Give him some time.
It helps to have competent people in the leadership positions too. I think they finally got out of that Daniel Snyder cloud of chaos, and now they have actual competent people doing football, making football decisions. So that certainly helps. And one of the crazy things too, Evan, real quick, is next year they have $100 million worth of cap space. How crazy is that?
Oh yeah,
wow. Yeah.
They got T. Higgins money. Year after they got Micah Parsons money. I don't know, you name it, but I do have a rant. Zach, you could maybe cut this out if you want, but it's a pretty good rant about like I appreciate Cy your perspective there and your feeling and confidence in the Commanders, and I do feel similarly as a fan, but so many fans and people make that type of claim, and even players. And I think they undervalue and like underappreciate how darn difficult it is to win a championship in sports, which almost discredits like the Chiefs and what they've done. Right. And it's like, it reminds me of like Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown was like, I mean, obviously he was kidding, but he was like, oh yeah, man, we're going like five NBA finals. And like the Sixers with their trust the process, they'd be like, it'd be a disappointment if we didn't win 2 championships.
Or as LeBron, when he was
LeBron, 5, the Miami 6, 7, Heat. As an Orioles fan, I'm like, man, with this young core, like I feel like we're gonna have like even multiple championships. And I'm like, you don't realize how darn difficult it is and how much can go wrong. And like only one team can win every year. So I have a little bit of rant on that topic of like, how so many fans and people and teams and players say that without realizing like how truly difficult it is to win one of these things.
That's true.
Look, man, I grew up with the Gibbs dynasty, so I understand. Like, it's like, I'm used to this, and then for 25 years, man, it's been misery. So I absolutely agree with your take on that, and I'll get to appreciate the word Cy about our team, but. It is very difficult to win a championship in any level of professional sports.
Well, I'll say this: I don't throw that around very easily, though. Yeah. That's like, I mean, I'm the guy. I'm the guy who picks the Chiefs every single year, so it's not like I'm out here, giving a lot of teams that credit. But my point is, David being 24 and playing like he's like 31 or 30 or whatever. Yeah. if I was a betting man in his career, which I expect him to play for 10 to 15 years at least, I would be willing to bet he wins at least one, if not more, given the trajectory of the team. That's
Right.
all I'm saying. And I wouldn't say that about a lot of people. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, there's only so many rookie quarterbacks I've ever said that about. I like to make bold proclamations, but not about the Super Bowl. So,
Right.
I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
I hope so.
Ev, close this out, Ev.
I hope so. No, yeah, Khoa, thanks for coming on. Lots of fun. Good meeting you. Good chat.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, boys.
HTTR or C this weekend. Hopefully they can pull an upset. Thanks to all of our viewers and supporters as always. We mentioned the Super Bowl. Keep an eye out for more information about that. But yeah, that was Mondays Down South.